So, a very happy San Jordi, a very happy San Jordi, a very happy St. George's Day. I'm very happy to be able to present poetry and prose by Jordi Llavina and translated by William Hamilton. And also, I'm very happy because Jordi Llavina is here to read a few lines from his poem. Of course, this edition is a bilingual edition. So Jordi's going to read one or two lines from his Catalan original, and then I will read the same lines, but in English. Hi, Jordi, how are you?
Hi, everybody. Fine. It is great to be here with you and with our listeners. I will read in Catalan language, and after that, you will read your own translation. I ara no sé per què em ve al cap un episodi de família que té com a protagonista el meu fill gran. Sent un nadó, passant les hores de dormida, solia, inconscient, tirar dins el bressol el cos amunt, reptant morós pel matalàs curtíssim que l'encoixinava. Vida allà dins colgada, vida brevíssima en dorment del fill. I no parava fins que el cap, recercador com el musell febril d'un talp, no s'encertia d'haver-ne aconseguit tocar el límit bla, enconxat de roba. Un cop sentia, m'imagino, en el seu crani d'ossos tendres i encara no encaixats del tot, aquell confí del primer llit, límit inaugural tan pròxim, confirmat, doncs, llavors el son ja era tranquil tota la nit i res podia desvetllar-lo. Voldria, doncs, deixant els versos alguna mena de certesa, pressentir el límit del llenguatge, poder-me figurar el topall del que es pot dir abans del no-res. D'aquest durable aprenentatge en guanyo un símbol, el detall del fill que dorm encara il·lès, nen condemnat, cor pur, hostatge del temps, la mort bram del sonall, vetlla el nadó al bressol estès, el té la falda, hòrrida imatge, la vida droga el seu vassall, compra a baix preu, ombres a pes la mercadera del carnatge. Jo sempre he escrit per curar el tall, que ens fa saber que no som res. Your turn.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Jordi. That's beautiful.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now I'm going to read the same lines, but in the English version. And now a family event carelessly springs to mind, in which my eldest child plays the main role. He was still a newborn baby, whiling away his hours of sleep, habitually twisting his body upwards in his cradle, creeping sluggishly across the tiny mattress that held him tight. A still hidden being, my son's momentary, brief, torpid life, he continued until his head, probing feverishly like a mole's snout, achieved its objective of managing to reach and touch the smooth, cloth-lined edge of the cot. At times, I imagine he felt, within his soft-boned cranium, not yet all rightly set in place, those boundaries of his first bed, inaugural limits so close, already confirmed. And then he would sleep soundly throughout the night, and nothing could stir or wake him. I'd like, therefore, to set in verse something of a certain truth, to presage the limit of language, to make out the mark of what can be said before the darkness falls. From this durable instruction, I earn a stark symbol, that of the sleeping child, yet still unharmed, doomed, pure of heart, a hostage to time. Death brandishes the rattle, cares for the child laid in its cot, bounces it on its lap. A dark image. The wet nurse drugs her lord. She buys low-cost shadows by weight, a morbid merchant of carnage. I have always written to heal the wound that shows us to be naught. So there you go.
Oh, that sounds very well in English.
No, it does. It sounds very good. Okay, so just a couple of questions, Jordi, for you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, this book is two of your works. This book contains two of your works. We have L'Ermita, the Hermitage, and then El Magraner, the pomegranate trees. So this is why it's called poetry and prose, because we've got the long poem, Ermita, which is what, 1,400, I think, lines? 401 lines. So there you go. So how exactly do you usually start writing a poem like these?
Well, it depends on the poem, because, for example, in the case of the Hermitage, L'Ermita, I think that it was in my mind some lines, and that was the, the thing that before these lines, there's the experience of return to a landscape of my childhood, and I suppose that, well, in the time that I mixed the first lines of the poem, that I had very clear, and this experience, uh, everything was very, very easy to begin to start writing the poem. But for example, in the case of the pomegranate tree, the experience was very, very different. I remember that I was walking in the countryside, because this is one of my favorite hobbies. And one day, I think that was in summer, last summer, I I stumbled into a pomegranate that was in the on the ground, and I think that I associated this experience to another one, the death of one of my friends, whose name was Magraner, that in Catalan language means pomegranate. So it's different in both cases, but what what I think is that when you have the first lines of a poem, if you conceive a whole poem or a narrative poem like those, for me it's easy. But the most important is to get to have the first lines, and in both cases, well, probably the first lines appear to me one day, and after that is work, work, and work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And in the Hermitage, some of the symbols within the poem are written as separate words in the margins.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that?
I think that probably the work of poetry is to choose some symbols. For me, it's very, very important, because poetry is always dealing with symbols. In my case, for example, the figure of Christ, Jesus Christ, is always present in my poems. In spite, I am not a believer. I don't believe in God, but actually, always the presence of Christ is striking me in my poem. So uh, Christ, or I don't know, the water, for example, the water is always flowing in my lines. Or in this case, for example, Rothko, the painter Rothko, and his canvas full of
Hmm.
color and silence and fear. Well, I decided to put these words, so these symbols, in the margins of the poem, because I think is a way to make clear the reading for the readers, and to know where I am in every moment of my reading in this case. And well, is that was my first experience in this case, my first typographic experience.
Well,
And,
it seems to me. Sorry to interrupt. It seems
well,
to me that along with Christ and Rothko and these images, that nature is a
of course.
very important subject in well, not only the Hermitage but also the pomegranate tree. Why is this? Why nature?
Well, first of all, I live nearby nature, because I'm I am in Vilafranca. Is It's a small city in the south of Barcelona, and we are surrounded by vineyards, for example. And as I said, one of my favorite hobbies is walking in the countryside. For me, it's very, very important. It's very, very important, the presence of trees, for example, uh, to know that I am close to the earth, to the smell of nature. I think that nature um, teach a lot of human life, and I can live without nature. It's very very important to me. So and of course, what I write is like objective correlate of my own experience. So I have to be in my place. I have to be close of these trees or close of these vineyards.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, in the pomegranate tree, you deal a lot with reality and dreams. In fact, you play a lot with the different tenses. Sometimes it's the present tense.
yeah,
Sometimes we've got present perfect, the past tense, things like this. Um, yeah. So, in terms of reality and dreams, what could you explain? Can you tell us a little bit
yeah.
about that, please?
It's the first time in one of my books that I am dealing with reality and dreams. Probably because, well, the pomegranate tree is a book about an experience that is not exactly a real experience. So, what I want to say is that, for example, uh, the issues of time and space are a bit confusing in the poem because the wanderer um, began walking in a place that reminds me, for example, what I see in my own place. But he's walking more and more, and he's getting from away from his place. So in I remember that in one of the poem, he decided to sleep on the ground of a, I think it is in the woods, and the dream he's living is mixing with his own experience. So, well, what I want to explain with this poem is um, the the difficult line, the difficult border between dreams and reality. Sometimes this is
Hmm.
exactly what I I would like to express in this poem. But actually, it's the first time that I use dreams in my inner poem.
Right. Okay. Now, I should mention actually that obviously the Hermitage is one long poem. The pomegranate tree is prose, but there are sections of poetry in there as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, why did you decide to do that? Because obviously you've written other books that are
yeah,
100% prose, and then to do this.
yeah. I think that, well, I need to I need to write prose, but prose is not so. Novel, for example, is not my genre because I prefer poetry. Well, but for example, in the case of the Hermitage, or in the case of a former book called Bella, the Wake, I dealt with prose of the time because they are actually long narrative poems. In the case of the pomegranate tree, it's not exactly a narrative poem, but is a poem that mixes poetry and prose. And we have some prose, for example, and like a signature in the end of the prose, you have a short poem. Well, probably I thought about this poem like a new experience of storytelling, a new experience of make poetry. In my case, because well, I suppose that the final lines of most of the proses are like a conclusion of the proses, and you can read this poem as as a story, as a short story. But actually, the most important is, yes, I insist on that, is the symbols. I am dealing all the time with them in the poem.
Fantastic. Okay, well, Jordi, thank you ever so much for
No, thank
giving us
you.
some
No,
insights into the way you work and the marvelous poetry and prose that you've given us here. And
mhm.
well, happy San Jordi.
Thank you very much. Happy St. Jordi for you, for everybody in New York, and congratulations for your new publishing house, for your translations, and well, everything is perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.